Hey guys, thank you for joining me. Right at the start of the video, I want to say this will not be a normal devotional video. There are a lot of current events that have happened, and I wanted to talk a little bit about those. I wanted to kind of address those, what's happened, and then explain kind of what I'll be doing, some of the things I'm doing and thinking about with all of it. And I just figured this might be the best time to do that. The last time I addressed current events was with the death of Ahmaud Arbery, who was jogging. He went into a construction site. There's video footage of him going in and leaving shortly after. Didn't do anything there. Looks like he just kind of walked in real quick and then left. A ex-police officer and his son believed that he matched the description of several other burglaries and thought that maybe he committed another crime at that site and decided to perform a citizen's arrest where they chased him down while he was jogging, and then in a scuffle that happened after that, they ended up shooting and killing him. This didn't make news until a couple months after the events, when the footage was revealed, showing that there were a lot of inconsistencies with police reports and the accounts that were given by the two men who did this. After this, Brianna Taylor was killed in her own house, where police executed a type of warrant where they do not need to give any warning. They just barge right in, and if I'm remembering right, they got this warrant on extremely shaky grounds. They might have even gotten the wrong address, the wrong person. But still, I mean, there was an incredibly excessive amount of force used entering the house to execute this warrant. And then just recently, George Floyd was, I think, believed to use a counterfeit 20 or something like that. And he was then pinned down by a police officer. It looks like it's a technique that they're being taught because there have been a lot of other videos of police officers using the same technique as a way to subdue and keep someone from being able to try to escape. They will put their knee on the person's neck or the top of their back. George Floyd was continuously repeating, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." Eventually he died because of this technique that was used. And after the death of George Floyd, there were protests. All of a sudden, in some places, there's been a lot of looting and rioting. Most of what I have heard is that the looting and the rioting has not come from people protesting the death of George Floyd and Brianna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. That all of that has tried to take advantage of a chaotic situation more than, or less than, instead of actually being part of the protests. Most of the protests have, at the very least, started peacefully. There have been peaceful protests here in Marion. There were peaceful protests in Kokomo, and they were blocking off streets, walking through crosswalks. They were approved by the mayor of Kokomo. And there's a video at an intersection where you can see the protesters walking by, blocking off the intersection, not allowing cars through. There are several cars built up on both sides of the intersection, and then you see a truck that had to go out into the opposite lane to get around the cars in front of him, or in front of the truck, to drive and try to drive through the protesters. There have been protests in Fort Wayne and Indianapolis that turned violent. I don't know if it was caused by the police officers or if it was caused by the protesters. You don't see that in video clips. You don't see where the violence starts. A lot of times the videos are being shown as the violence is happening. So I can't say who caused it, but there's been a lot of this where police have been responding to these protests very violently. It sounds like there are groups that are trying to enter peaceful protests to purposefully cause violence. There have been people reporting that there have been generally younger white men coming into the protests with assault rifles, armed ready to attack police officers, and the peaceful protesters, who are largely African Americans, are trying to keep the protests peaceful. There has been plenty of evidence that police have caused a good amount of the violence too. They have pointed tear gas at news cameras. They have repeatedly used very excessive force to attack people who are complying but questioning as well. So they're walking away as police are trying to march them away from what's been happening. They're walking away, but they're turning around, talking to the police, interacting with them, and then the police officer suddenly gets very violent, a lot of times blindsiding these people. So all sorts of people are at fault in all these circumstances. I can't say who started it. A lot of people are causing the violence. The president didn't help matters, recently saying he will bring U.S. Army forces who are on active duty into states to stop protests, not to keep peace, but to purposefully stop protests. And recently the president wanted to get a picture outside of a church, but there were protests happening in the area. So the president ordered police to stop the peaceful protesters with tear gas and rubber bullets. Now, in all of this, I'm seeing a lot of stuff posted on social media about different things with what's going on. And I'm taking what I'm going to try to do from this, from comments made by a classmate of mine whose first name's Jericho. He's a Facebook friend of mine. He recently posted that he's been asked what, as an African American, he's been asked how should people respond? What does he think people should do in response? And he said, he's seen a lot of people very vocal on Facebook, and he appreciates their vocal support, their very public support. He also knows of several people who haven't been vocal but have been earnestly praying, who have been supporting them, just not on a platform like Facebook, not as publicly, and he thanks them for their support as well. For me, just entering Facebook anymore is becoming too overwhelming. There's just so much happening. I mean, we have the pandemic and the quarantine, and now we're having all of this stuff, and I don't see Facebook as helpful because we really need a dialogue. We really need to begin interacting with each other as people and building relationships, and that's not what Facebook does. Facebook gives us a platform for ideas, but not a very good platform for truly building deep and meaningful relationships across boundaries. So I deleted Facebook from my phone. I'm not going to be getting on it that much. You'll still see my videos on Facebook because I can cross-post them from YouTube to Facebook without getting on Facebook. And I will still be keeping up on my church's Facebook pages, but I will not be getting on my own Facebook page and just scrolling through. I'm also going to be trying to learn a bit more about how to interact with all of this, but also trying to build relationships more. I had reached out when I got to Marion to as many of the churches as I could to try to connect. Really haven't connected with African American churches. Got to connect with a large number of white churches and white pastors, but not African Americans. So trying to build those relationships, get to know them, get to know a lot more of them, and get to know more of their experience. Also getting to know the police forces better. There's a friend of mine whose husband was a state trooper who passed away in a car accident sometime last year, and she expressed a lot of pain, not because none of this stuff is true, but because in the midst of all of this, people are crying out for police officers to be killed, and her husband died as a police officer, and it causes her great pain and anguish. And so getting to build relationships with police officers and their families, getting to know them better, and of course, making it very clear when things cross a line that that's not acceptable, it's not okay, it never should be. But the only way that I see true lasting change happening isn't through Facebook posts. It's definitely not through Facebook posts. Yeah, I think the protests are going to be able to go a long way toward making real lasting change. Protests like this have happened at a lot of key points in our history when people's rights needed to be recognized and improved. Protests like the American Revolution, like what led to the Civil War trying to end slavery, protests like the Civil Rights Movement. It's always been this crazy, chaotic mess that has brought about these changes in the United States. But I don't see the Facebook posts doing that. And even then, when we're not really building relationships and when we're not doing the work within ourselves, when we only keep the work to the communities who need to gain rights, and when we only keep the work to these systems that do need to change, but we don't do the work to change ourselves, we end up back needing more work to be done. And in this world that is fallen into sin, the work will always need to be done, but we're not taking the steps forward that we should be. We are falling backward in this work because the work hasn't been done in us. And so there are a couple of things that I'm going to be reading, trying to see how to better do that work within myself, learning more about the work I need to be doing. I'm going to try to build those relationships, really get to know people, get to know the other perspectives. Because, I have no idea what it's like to be black in the United States. Goodness, I'm about as white as it comes. I'm recording this video in tennis shoes, cargo shorts, and a polo shirt. I don't understand what their perspective is like, what their experiences are like, and it means that I can't speak very accurately to them. I also don't know what it's like to be a police officer. I don't know what it's like to be in a situation where when I make the wrong decision, it could cost someone else their life. But if I make the wrong decision, it could also cost me my life. I don't know what that's like. And so I need to build relationships with the people who do know what it's like. I think a lot of us need to do that. Because it seems so easy to me to stand off from afar and pass judgment on groups from afar without doing the work in ourselves. Maybe this is where it takes the devotional turn, because isn't that what Jesus talked about? To not try to get a speck out of someone else's eye, but to take the log out of your own first. I need to do the work in myself. I need to work on the log that is in my eye that prevents me from seeing things the way they are, that prevents me from remembering my friend, the wife of a deceased police officer, that prevents me from seeing the experience of my African American friends who I care about, but I don't really know what their experience is, and I struggle then to know how to come alongside them. But one thing's for sure, Facebook won't help me do that. Continuing to post videos like this, no, that doesn't help me do it either. This is just letting all of you know I'm going to try to do the work, and I want to encourage all of you to do it too. Let's try to address the log of our biases, of our racism, of our narrowed way of thinking that prevents us from seeing what God is trying to do in our world. Let's get that log out of our eye so that maybe we can address the specks in other people's eyes, the issues that some other people are having, the issues that are in our world today. Please join me as I, and hopefully all of us, try to work on that log that we are all going to have to face. Thank you for hearing this rambling video this week. I will come back with a fun video Friday, another Saturday video. But for now, God bless you all. Take care.